This morning, I want to talk about the topic of meaning and self-realization. And eudaimonic, a Greek word from some of the Greek philosophers, refers to a type of happiness that is achieved or is a product of living a meaningful and purposeful life. One which focuses on personal growth and virtue and ethics rather than just sensual pleasure. And it emphasizes this point of view, this philosophy, the importance of fulfilling each of our individual potentials and living in accordance with our true values. The eudaimonic approach is rooted primarily in the writings of the ancient Greek writings of Aristotle. It emphasizes the cultivation of meaning, self-realization, and the fulfillment of our potential as a cornerstone of a flourishing life. And rather than prioritizing, as I said, fleeting pleasures or external successes or achievements, it defines well-being as the extent to which each of us is fully functioning. In other words, living in alignment with our deepest values and actualizing our own unique capacities, which is going to differ from with each of us. And from a Buddhist perspective, this approach really resonates with some of the key concepts that the Buddha taught. You know, both traditions emphasize the pursuit of inner growth, inner improvement, self-awareness, and transcending superficial desires, some of which we talked about last night for those of you that were book group. And the Buddhist path offers a nuanced understanding, though, I think, of well-being that goes beyond individual flourishing, because it encompasses universal liberation, not just for ourselves, but the notion that everyone should experience it, and compassionate engagement with the world. So it not only subsumes what Aristotle talked about, but it extends it outwardly to others. In Buddhism, as you know, the concept of well-being is intimately tied to the reduction of suffering and the attainment of inner peace and freedom. The Buddha taught that, of course, the root cause of our suffering lies in craving, ignorance, and attachment, the three poisons, and these mental habits, how they keep us trapped in cycles of dissatisfaction, even when we are achieving external success or fulfilling sensory pleasures. So the point is that all the external success, all the sensory pleasures are not going to do the job if we're not dealing with these inner challenges of craving, ignorance, and attachment. So from a Buddhist perspective, true well-being arises not from accumulating pleasure, not from external accomplishments, but from developing insight into the true nature of reality, seeing things clearly, and cultivating a mind that is free from clinging and free from aversion. We're not holding on to things, we're not pushing things away. And this understanding aligns with the eudaimonic emphasis on finding meaning and self-realization beyond the superficial pleasures of pursuit of hedonistic pleasures. Both perspectives recognize that a life guided by wisdom, ethical conduct, and purposeful engagement lead to a deeper and more enduring sense of fulfillment, and a stronger, more stable sense of fulfillment, one that's not subject to the prevailing winds. However, while the eudaimonic approach focuses on personal potential, as I said, Buddhism extends the process to include the recognition of the interconnectedness of all beings and the impermanent nature of the self. So it goes beyond just that personal potential to interconnection and impermanence, and incorporates it. In doing so, it advocates for well-being that's not centered solely on us as individuals, but one that's rooted in compassion and alleviation of suffering for all. We want to commit to that in the world. The eudaimonic approach of self-realization involves living in alignment with our values, cultivating virtues, and striving to fulfill our potential. And in Buddhism, this process is mirrored in the concept of right effort, one of the, of course, steps of the Noble Eightfold Path, because right effort entails cultivating wholesome states of mind, abandoning unwholesome states of mind, and diligently striving toward freedom. And this practice encourages us, Buddhist practice, to develop qualities such as mindfulness, wisdom, generosity, which extends it outwardly, and loving kindness, which extends those qualities outwardly. So qualities which not only aid in our personal growth, but contribute to the well-being of others. You know, the Buddha really understood that if we only focused on ourselves, it would not reduce suffering in others or in the world. And and this is where Buddhism diverges from the eudaimonic approach to the understanding of the self, because eudaimonic framework often assumes a fixed inherent self that could or should be actualized. Whereas, you know, in Buddhism, the self is a construct made up of a collection of impermanent aggregates that lack an independent essence. We're always in flux, always changing, always shifting internally, moods, physiology, and so forth. So self-realization in Buddhism is not about discovering and expressing a fixed identity, but it's transcending the illusion of a fixed self altogether. And this is the realization that leads to freedom from ego-based desires and ego-based fears, which allows us then to function fully and harmoniously in the world. Now, a central tenet of the eudaimonic approach is the cultivation of meaning in life. And in Buddhism, we find this meaning through the practices of the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha that guide us toward greater freedom. Engaging with the Dharma provides a profound sense of purpose, as it involves not only personal transformation, but contributing to the well-being of all sentient beings. You know, the Buddhist concept of bodhicitta, the awakened mind, exemplifies this dual focus. Bodhicitta arises from the aspiration to not only attain freedom for ourselves, but for the benefit of others as well. That we take that freedom that we find in that enlightened mind and use it to the benefit of others. And this altruistic intention gives life deep meaning, and it connects individual well-being with the broader goal of bringing it into the world. Now, our practice encourages us, of course, to find meaning in the present moment with the practice of mindfulness. By fully engaging with the here and now, we appreciate life as it unfolds. We don't try to control it. We don't try to direct it. We don't try to filter out the unpleasant stuff. We appreciate it in all its complexity, all its joys, and all its sorrows as it unfolds. And rather than constantly striving for future achievements or dwelling on past regrets, we spend our time in the moment watching life unfold. And this mindful present aligns with the eudaimonic emphasis on living authentically and intentionally, which from that philosophical school fosters a sense of purpose and connection in everyday activities. There's tremendous overlap with many aspects of these two belief systems. The eudaimonic idea of a fully functioning person involves living in alignment with our own values and actualizing our potential, as I said a little while ago. And in Buddhism, this state of fully functioning is intricately tied to ethics and compassion. As you know, ethical conduct forms the foundation of our path because it creates conditions for inner peace and harmonious relationships. If we're behaving ethically, it's going to reduce the likelihood of conflict that are driven by the ego's needs. You'll recall that the 5 lay precepts that the Buddha taught, abstaining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, false speech, and abuse of intoxicants, serve as baseline practical guidelines for living in a way that minimizes harm and promotes well-being for ourselves and others. The precepts, as part of the ethical foundation, are there for a very practical reason, and it is to promote well-being and minimize harm to ourselves and others. And then we have, of course, compassion, which is essential to our understanding of well-being. From a Buddhist perspective, a fully functioning person is one who recognizes the interconnection of life and acts with kindness and empathy toward all. because this compassionate engagement not only helps alleviate the suffering of others, but it also brings us a profound sense of joy and fulfillment. You know, the Buddha talked about generosity and helping others is something which really benefits us. It brings us joy for doing it. And in this way, our path integrates personal well-being with this notion of the collective welfare, a vision of flourishing that transcends our individual concerns. So while the eudaimonic approach emphasizes personal growth and flourishing, Buddhism points toward a goal that transcends just that individual well-being. And that's an important distinction. You know, freedom, which is achieved through the realization of the Four Noble Truths and the practice of the Eightfold Path, which leads to a reduction in our suffering. Because in this state, we're no longer bound by delusions of self, delusions of the ego. We're no longer bound by craving. Our actions are guided by wisdom and compassion. Thus, while the eudaimonic approach offers a valuable framework for cultivating a meaningful and fulfilling life, our Buddhist practice extends that vision to include freedom for all beings. And this broader perspective highlights the profound interconnectedness of individual and collective well-being. It reminds us that true flourishing arises not only from personal growth, but also from compassionate service to others. In our modern world, where the pursuit of hedonistic pleasures and material success almost always leads to stress and dissatisfaction, these approaches, both of them, lead to a refreshing alternative. Buddhism complements this framework by providing practical tools, a roadmap, if you will, for cultivating meaning, self-awareness, and ethical conduct. Practices such as mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation, observing our ethical foundation, help us align our lives with our deepest values. And in doing so, contributes to the well-being of others. It spills onto those around us who reap the benefits as well. At the same time, Buddhism's emphasis on impermanence, no self, and interdependence challenges us to expand our understanding of well-being, but beyond our individual selves. By recognizing this interconnected nature, we move toward a more inclusive and compassionate vision of flourishing that benefits not only ourselves, but the world around us. Both perspectives encourage us to look beyond fleeting pleasures and superficial achievements. But Buddhism enriches this vision by offering profound insights into the nature of self, the causes of suffering, and the path to freedom. And especially suffering. I mean, the eudaimonic approach really doesn't talk about it. And I think the Buddha's emphasis on suffering is one of his most powerful teachings. But by integrating the practical teachings of Buddhism with the eudaimonic approach on personal growth, we begin to create lives that are not only meaningful and fulfilling, but rooted in wisdom, compassion, and the aspiration or intention for universal well-being. And when we embody the essence of both traditions, the pursuit of flourishing lifts ourselves and all beings into a more ethical and compassionate life. So that's some thoughts on the confluence of Buddhism and Aristotle.